All right, so this is the NGINX controller cloud install workflow. In our start block, we have all of our initial variables, which get assigned throughout the course of the workflow. So let's step through the different blocks of this workflow. So the first thing that we need to do is specify the parameters of our AWS RDS database. So we have an RDS database object where we specify different options for our RDS instance that we require, which is a Postgres instance to basically host the NGINX controller. We specify the port and the username and password to use within RDS. The host gets assigned in the next block when we actually create the RDS instance, and everything in options. So basically these are just AWS options. We specify the storage of the database, the type of database, which is Postgres, as well as the options or parameter group name for the database in AWS. And we give the database a name, and we choose an instance ID, which is going to also be Postgres. So then we verify that the parameter group for our database exists within our AWS instance, and we reference the parameter group we assigned in the previous block. We then actually launch the RDS database instance using all of our pre-specified options from before. So all of those options are housed in the object, and we map all of these to the different fields of this subflow that we call. We then assign the host variable of our RDS object to the host that was assigned by AWS after the creation operation is successful. We then call another subflow that gets the Amazon Simple Email Service SMTP configuration credentials for our AWS region. And we assign our SES SMTP object, which houses that configuration information based on the result of this subflow that we call. We then assign the no reply address for our SMTP configuration that we're going to use in our NGINX controller install. And then finally, we need to launch the actual host instance that we're going to install the NGINX controller on. So we call the AWS EC2 launch Ubuntu VM sub workflow. We specify the same AWS region we used before. We name our host NGINX controller host, an appropriate name. And then we're referencing our AWS auth key that we're still using throughout this workflow. Specified our security group. And then for this particular install, 8 CPUs and 16 gigabytes of RAM and a storage disk of 100 gigabytes. So we specify all these right in our block here, and the instance will get built with specs that meet or exceed this level. After our EC2 instance has been built successfully, we then assign an object called EC2 host that gets returned to the user with the result of this build, so we can access the instance later on if needed. Once this is complete, we then describe the EC2 instance we just built so that we can actually get the external IP of it and assign that to the FQDN variable that's required in the NGINX controller host setup. So we're basically running this to get the fully qualified domain name of the NGINX host. And then we begin our sequence of SSH commands that are going to install the NGINX controller on our EC2 host. So first we make a temporary directory, and we wget from a S3 bucket the tar file for the NGINX controller. And we also get the RDS combined certificate authority bundle. So for all of our SSH blocks, we specify the host from the NGINX VM we created above, the standard SSH port, as well as the login username and private key from creating our EC2 instance. And then we then unzip the tar file, which we got in the previous command. After doing so, we install a few dependencies. So we install Docker, Socat, EB tables, and finally we run the install command for NGINX controller on this host now that we've successfully unzipped this file. And in this install command, we specify all of the configuration information from the RDS database we created previously, as well as from the SES SMTP configuration we generated, along with different variables we specified in our start block, such as the admin email address, we want the default admin password to be, the organization name, admin name, etc. And we also provide the FQDN that we generated when we created our EC2 host to host this instance. Once this is complete, we assign the controller install variable to the result of this installation for debugging purposes. So if anything is to go wrong in this install, we can debug it pretty quickly. And we finally fire off an email to let the user know that their NGINX controller host has been provisioned correctly. And this will be delivered directly to the inbox and include a link to the login as well as the admin email and the admin password that we specified in the start block for easy access. And now we will run the workflow. So our RDS database has been created and is online. At this stage in the flow's execution, if we go into our EC2 instances, we can now see that within EC2, the NGINX controller host has been provisioned and is running. It's currently initializing. And now we can see that our NGINX controller host instance has been provisioned successfully and is running. Once our NGINX controller installation completes, we will see that the workflow returns in its result the admin email address we initially specified for login, as well as the admin password we specified, and the FQDN of our NGINX controller host. And we're also returned information on the initial configuration for the NGINX controller instance, including the RDS database, the SES SMTP configuration, as well as the EC2 host that is hosting our NGINX controller instance. We should have also received an email notification that our NGINX controller host has been provisioned properly with the default credentials which we specified in our workflow. And if we open this link, we'll be at the login page of our NGINX controller host, and we can copy over our credentials. And we have logged into our NGINX controller instance. So at this point, we can upload our license file or paste our license and complete the configuration of our NGINX controller. So this has been the NGINX controller cloud installation workflow, which is using AWS's RDS, SES, and EC2 to host the components of the instance.